All right, cool. Hey, so there was once a king in the ancient world by the name of Balak. And Balak was the king of a nation that was called Moab. And Balak had a problem. Or at least he had a problem in his own mind. It wasn't actually a problem, but it was a problem in his head. You see, the problem was his country was directly on the path of where the people of Israel were walking. And they were going from not being free and not being a people and being slaves in Egypt. And God had promised them a specific land, and they were traveling from point A to point B, but they were going the long way around. And so Moab, the place where Balak was a king, they were right in the path of where the Jews were going. And we have to understand that the information they get is kind of through the grapevine information. Like we don't, it's not like they're just reading it on the internet or in the newspaper or whatever. Like you're hearing everything like third and fourth and fifth hand. And so all Balak knows is that the people of Israel were slaves in Egypt, and a bunch of terrible things happened to the Egyptians, and they were let go. And now they're traveling, and everybody who gets in the Israelites' way, bad things happen to them. And he doesn't know why. He doesn't know if they're just, there's this crazy fighting force, or if they, there's just so many of them that they just overwhelm you. He doesn't know, he just doesn't know what's going on. He just knows that when it comes down to the people of Israel, this nomadic group of people, not really even a nation yet, just traveling through, that whenever anybody kind of gets in the way, bad things happen. And he was a good king, and he wanted his people to be protected. And so he made the bold choice to say, well, if I am going to survive this, if I'm going to protect my people, I don't need to wait for them to act first. I should get out in front of this, and I should have a preemptive attack on these people. To those ends, he called up a friend of his, a prophet by the name of Balaam. Now, as soon as I say Balaam, there's some weird stuff that we have to address. The first thing is this. Usually, when you reach out to a prophet, you're asking for like a sermon. You're asking for information. You're asking for this prophet to say, this is what God wants, or this is what the gods want, depending on your religion, or this is what I should do. You're looking for advice, and maybe you follow that advice. Maybe you don't follow that advice. Maybe you just take, it's not advice, it's just information that you put into your calculator and say, I'm going to use that as an input as I make decisions. Regardless, the fact is that usually when you talk to a prophet, you're looking for information. But Balak was not looking for information. He was looking for a weapon. You see, Balaam, for some reason, somehow had this ability to both curse or bless groups or individuals. And sometimes when you hear this story, people say, well, maybe he didn't have the ability. But it's actually funny because, as we're going to find out, God actually treats Balaam like he has this ability. He treats him like he actually has this the chance to do it. And that's odd because that's not the sort of thing you learn at Bible college. Like I had 4 years of Bible college, did a 5-year degree in 4 years of Bible college, okay? I did not ever learn witchcraft. Like, here's how you curse people. This is not Harry Potter. This is not Hogwarts, okay? Like, you don't get to curse people and bless people. But somehow, Balaam, whatever faith he had, whatever religion he had, whatever group he belonged to, he was able to bless people or curse people. And when he did, it happened. Like, he cursed people and they were cursed. He would bless people and they were blessed. So Balak reaches out to Balaam asking for, hey, look, I'll give you a bunch of money. I will reimburse you for your time, but I need you to curse the people of Israel as they come through. Okay, so that's the first thing that's odd. The second thing that's odd, though, is I just mentioned, like, I don't know what Balak's religion is. I don't know what culture he comes from, what nation. I know nothing about that. All that I know is that, very strangely, he believes in the right God. Like, it's odd because the whole point of the Old Testament, the whole point of, a lot of the story of, the Hebrew Bible is that the real God, the one true God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who's the creator of everything, that God has a special relationship with God's chosen people in Israel. But every now and then, we run into these oddities where you've got people who are not Jewish, who are not Hebrews and yet seem to know God. Balaam prays to God. Balaam hears from God. Balaam believes in God and trusts God, and he is a prophet of God. And I don't mean the gods. I don't mean the Canaanite gods. I don't mean the Moabite gods. I mean God. Capital G, Yahweh, Jehovah, Elohim, God. And that's odd. Particularly because he's doing this whole blessing and cursing thing. We don't know why this is who he is. We don't know why God is fine with him doing this stuff. All we know is that God, the real God, the God you and I worship, had this relationship with Balaam. So up front, this is a strange story. You got a king asking a prophet something odd, and the prophet himself is also odd. And then the story proceeds in a way that is maybe somewhat surprising. So the Balak sends his messengers, and he says, look, I'm going to give you all this money. I'll make you extremely rich. I'll give you, all this stuff. What I need from you is just to curse the Israelites. And Balaam, you would think the sort of fella that, curses people, would say, oh, yeah, no problem. Give me the money. But he doesn't. He actually says, okay, I will do what God wants me to do. So give me the night. God will speak to me, and then I'll let you know what he says in the morning. Now, I don't know what your relationship with God is, but, if I asked you right now, hey, could you talk to God tonight, and he'll talk back, and you get back to me in the morning? If you're anything like me, you don't have an answer come morning. That's not how God works, at least in my experience with my relationship with God. But hilariously, Balaam is like, give me the night. He goes to bed, and God's like, okay, yeah, I'll talk to you. God is basically on speed dial. Just give me a minute. So God speaks to Balaam, and he's like, hey, those guys, don't go with them. Don't do anything they say. Those are the bad guys in the story. Don't do that. And so the next morning, Balaam is like, hey, look, I'm sorry, King Balak, confusing name that's a lot like mine. I can't do what you ask. Okay, so have a good one. Deal with Israel on your own. So Balak is like, well, I don't like that answer, and I'm a king, and I'm not used to being told no. So he sends messengers back to Balaam, and he's like, look, these messengers say, did we say you'd get a lot of money? No, what we meant was you get a blank check. Anything you want. At all. And Balak's like, well, in that case, let me ask God again. Which is really funny logic. God didn't want it for this amount of money, but God's cool with it for this. God's just holding out for a bigger contract. Balaam thinks maybe. And so Balaam goes to God, and he's like, hey, what do I do? And God says, this time, hilariously, he's like, okay, well, this time I want you to go with them, but when you go with them, do exactly what I say, don't do what they say. And Balaam's like, well, that was weird. I didn't see that coming. I didn't know the holding out for a bigger contract that would actually work. I guess I'll go. So Balaam packs things up, and he gets onto his sturdy, faithful steed, his donkey, and they go to travel to Balak. And this is where the part of the story is you probably have heard. Okay, so if you're like, oh, that sounds familiar, yeah, that's where we're going. So Balaam is on the way. He's on the road to Balak, and he's on his donkey. And this donkey, I mean, he loves this donkey. She's beautiful as donkeys go, and she's been a faithful friend. She's less a farm animal and less a beast of burden and more a pet. He just loves her. She's so great. And so he's riding his donkey. He's having a good time. And suddenly, it's like the controller breaks. She just freaks out. Inexplicably, she just doesn't seem like herself. So all of a sudden, just they're walking the road, and this donkey it just stops walking the road, and she takes a left turn into the field. She just takes off that way. And Balaam's like, what are you doing? And she just walks that way into the field. And he's like, this is ridiculous. Okay, well, we're going that way. Like, this, what's wrong with you? And he gets her back on the path, and she seems to be like afraid of something in the road, and so she does this thing. My dogs do this all the time. I know I always talk about my dogs in sermons, but my dogs do this where like they're trying to avoid something, so they get like really low to the ground, like really small, and they like shove themselves up against the wall as they kind of go by. And so that's what this donkey does. She like shoves herself up against this wall, and the problem is like Balaam's riding it, like riding the donkey, and so like it smashes his foot against the wall, and he's not happy about that, and so he's trying to get her back and everything, and finally, like he's not getting the message that she doesn't want to do what he's wanting her to do, so she just stops and sits down, and just looks at him like, we're not going anywhere, dude. Now, Balaam doesn't like this. And so Balaam, like this part of the story is unpleasant. I'm sorry, but it's what you do with animals, especially, horse. Like you see like, they're like the old cowboy movies, like they've got spurs for a reason and they've got that leather whip thing, what's that word called? The thing, like the reins, thank you. Like no one said it, but I found it, so reins. Like you got like that, those are meant to like hit the horse so they go. And so that's what Balaam does. Like he's hitting the donkey. He's like trying, like he's got the reins. He's trying to get the donkey. So he's literally just beating this donkey now. Like if you can imagine, like the donkey is sitting on the ground, he's just like hitting the donkey, and the donkey's not doing anything. And that's when God does the funniest miracle in the world. God gives this donkey the ability to talk. And you might think, well, what's a donkey thinking about? What does a donkey say? Like, what is in the head of the donkey? And what's amazing is God gives the donkey the ability to speak, and the first thing she does is look at Balaam and say, why are you hitting me? Because of course she would. Like, what else would she say? She's literally being hit, and he's like, well, I'm hitting you because hilariously, Balaam doesn't seem shook at all by the fact that his donkey's talking to him. And he's like, well, I'm hitting you because you're not doing what I want. And she's like, yeah, did you ever think maybe I'm right? Like, how long have you ridden me, dude? How many times have I failed you? I am faithful and true. Trust me. And Balaam's like, well, this is a weird afternoon. And at that moment, as the donkey is imploring Balaam to listen, he sees what the donkey had seen. It's, again, like my dogs. Like, do you know that dogs, like, see ghosts? Like, they see, like they see stuff before, like, you don't see it, but the dogs see it. I grew up in a haunted house, and I took my first dog to my house for the first time, and he just lost it. Like, he would just stare into space. Like, he was just like, I don't know where you brought me, but this is not cool, man, because you don't see this stuff, but I am. It's a true story. It's good. Good boy, Griffey. All right, so anyway, Balaam sees what his donkey has been seeing. And it's this angel of the Lord that's standing in the middle of the road. That's why the donkey didn't want to go. The donkey had seen the angels. She tried to get away, and then she tried to like pass by on the side, and she just said, forget it. I'm just going to sit down. And so Balaam, seeing the angel of the Lord, finally gets what's going on, and he realizes, I'm not supposed to be doing what I'm doing at all. And so eventually he does go and he meets Balak, but when Balak asks him to curse the people of Israel, Balaam ends up blessing the people of Israel instead. This amazing, beautiful act of which apparently he has power to do, ends up blessing the people of Israel. And that's the end of at least that part of the story. Now, I bring this up for a couple of reasons. There's a lot of lessons we could learn. There's a lot of stuff we could learn. I mean, it's a talking donkey story, guys. There's a lot we could talk about with the talking donkey. But I think there's two things we need to highlight. There's two things we need to say. First thing, this is a story that teaches us humility. A story that teaches us not to get too big for our britches. And it really doesn't matter like what vantage point you tell the story from. So let's just start with Balaam. Really simply. Balaam is a prophet of God. He is a powerful, important man. He is a man so powerful and so important that he can say with a straight face, I need to hear from God tonight. put a time frame on it. I need to hear from God tonight, and God shows up. He is that important. We cannot say that Balaam is not an important prophet of God, because he is an important prophet of God. Also, his donkey yelled at him. Like, if you get rebuked by your donkey, if you get like a farm animal and they mouth off to you and they're right and you're wrong, that's a humbling moment, my friends. Like, it's humbling. If one day just a chicken was like, whoa, you are wrong about the existential truth of the universe. The chicken knows and I don't. This guy got yelled at by his donkey. And the donkey was right. You can't get a lot more humbling than that. So that's Balaam. Let's talk about Balak. Balak is a king. He's the king of the castle. He's the head honcho. He's at the top of the heap. Pick your illustration. He is the most important man in Moab. He has a nation. And everyone looks to him for guidance and leadership. And he says, it is so important that we are protected. And God said, is it? Because I don't know that I care all that much what happens. I mean, like, I do, but like, this group of traveling nomads is actually way more important to me. They're my chosen people, you're not. And I know that sounds harsh. I know it does, but it's something we all need to face too. Like, I think it's always funny when people talk about like our country. I don't want to get political here. I'm not gonna, maybe a little. But listen, people talk about our country. It's like we're like this like vital part of world history. Guys, like humans have been on the planet for 200,000 years. All right, like human history, like civilizations have been going on for 10, 11,000 years. Empires raised and fell. Like empires, like they existed for thousands of years. And you don't know their names. Guys, we've been around for 250 years. We're nothing. I know it's hard to hear. Like, we're nothing. We're a country, and that's cool. And we can do good and we can do bad. But, like, we are not essential to the story of humanity. We are one of a billion countries over the last 200,000 years. That's it. And that's what Balak finds out. Like, in his mind, Moab is the center of the universe. Because of course it is. He's the king of this country. Of course, everything in his mind filters through what's good for Moab. I mean, these people, the Israelites, are walking, and all he can think is, what's good for me? How does this work for me? What he learns is, Moab, you're not part of the conversation at all. You're inserting yourself into the story that you're not welcome in. This is the story about Israel. And y'all just showed up and said, what about me? Nothing about you. Go home. That's humbling. But now let's talk about Israel. Because you know why Israel is God's chosen people? Yeah, because God felt like it. That's it. That's literally all. Like they didn't do. And it's funny because like Jewish people in the ancient world are like, well, we have God, and we have the truth, and we have the law, and later on we have the temple, and we are very good. Well, if y'all are so good, why is Balaam, a not Jewish guy, a prophet who has these magical Hogwarts abilities? No, really. Y'all think you're the center of the universe, then what's Balaam's story? Because the Jews, they're God's chosen people. That guy's not God's chosen people, and he has stuff that's cooler than what you have. I mean, even the fact that God gave a miracle to a donkey. A donkey is not human, guys. And we think that, like, miracles and everything else, like, we think, like, well, that's about us, right? God does these things for us. Sure, but also the donkey. And the donkey was right. Every part of this story causes us to say, well, how important are we, actually? Every part of this story screams at us, you are not the center of the world. It's not about you ever. And I don't care if you're Balaam, you're Balak, you're the Moabites, you're the Israelites, you're the donkey. It doesn't matter. Every single part of the story screams God's doing a thing, and maybe you're part of it in this part of it, and maybe you're not part of it, but at the end of the day, it's about what God is doing, not about who you think you are. So this is a story about humility. But it's not just about a story about humility. It's also a story about how deeply loved everyone in this story is. Just go back to the list again. Balaam is not Jewish. Balaam is not God's chosen people. And yet when he says, I need to hear from God, God says, okay, I love you enough to speak to you. That's amazing. Talk about Balak. Balak is sinning, guys. I don't know if you're aware, but you'll try to curse an enemy nation that didn't do anything to you. That's a sin. So he's sinning. Like he's attempting. This would at least be attempted murder. I watch these murder shows, and I always love when the people are so incompetent that they can't get the murder done. Like they tried so hard. Like I just watched one recently about this guy who tried to hire somebody to kill his wife, and he hired this dude who was really bad, and so the wife killed that dude. And it was like, yeah, that's what you get, man. Either kill your wife proper, or that's not the lesson. I'm sorry. That wasn't the lesson. There was another lesson. I've lost it. Anyway, I always think it's funny when the people are just like they want to kill people, but they're just incompetent. Balak was like, I want to curse the Jews, but he can't get it done. Like he's not good at this. And yet, God sends him a prophet to tell him the truth. Balak has a chance to repent and change and be better. This horrible sinner who's trying to do terrible things to people, God says, I know you can do better. Let me give you this chance. Let's talk about the Jews. God obviously is protecting the Jews in this whole thing. They are helpless, right? They are just wandering nomads. God is obviously protecting them. Let's talk about the donkey. Let's talk about God apparently loving animals enough to one day giving one the dignity to speak up for herself. It's kind of a fun thing. I mean, I'm still not going to be a vegan, but like it's fun, you know. Still, last night I fried a ribeye in bacon grease. Guys, it was so good. Oh, it was delicious. Stephanie, was it good? Oh, it was so good. Oh, but God loves animals, so it's fine. I do too. They're good. All right. Delicious. The point is, everybody here is loved. And so you have this story that gives us like these twin ideas where you have a call to humility. It's not about you. But the one that it is actually about loves you deeply. Story about a talking donkey gives us that. And you might think, Drew, you're reading too much into that. Okay, so let's talk about a different story. This morning, we're in our first week of our series called The Storm. The next month, we're going to talk about one story the whole time. And it's the story that happens right after Jesus feeds the 5,000. So, giant crowd of people, Jesus feeds them all. It's been a long day for everybody. A lot of food, a lot of serving, a lot of stuff. Everybody's tired. Everybody wants to, move on. And this is the story that we read. In the gospel, according to John, it goes like this. That evening, Jesus' disciples went down to the shore to wait for him. But as darkness fell and Jesus still hadn't come back, they got into the boat and headed across the lake towards Capernaum. Soon a gale swept down among them, and the sea grew very rough. They had rowed 3 or 4 miles when suddenly they saw Jesus walking on the water towards the boat. They were terrified, but he called out to them, "Don't be afraid, I am here." Then they were eager to let him in the boat, and immediately they arrived at their destination. We're going to read all 3 versions of that. There's 3 versions of that story in our Bible. And the next month, we're going to kind of bounce around to the different versions. But this is a story that we generally think of as, that's the Jesus walking water story. But if we think about it, and we're going to the next month in this series, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot more than just Jesus walks on water, have a good day. And so we're going to do that. But let's get the obvious stuff out of the way. As we begin this morning, let's get the obvious stuff about what happened in the storm out of the way first, and that is some miracles happened that Jesus performed. Now, the first one we know. We just said it. It's the famous one. It's the whole thing. Jesus walks on water. Like, Jesus walking in water is so, like, notorious. We named a lizard after it, right? Like, it's just like if you ask like any idiot on the street, like, hey, tell me about Jesus, like, hey, walked on water. Like, we know that that's a thing. So walking on water, Jesus does that. But as it turns out, this is not the only miracle in this story. There's one that we read, and then there's one that we didn't read. Okay. So the one that we read is this last part of the end, and it's always kind of baffled me, and I thought it was interesting. It says they were eager to let him in the boat, and immediately they arrived at their destination. So they're like out, like they're in this boat, and they're just like in the middle of the water. We're even told it's like 3 or 4 miles, I think it is, in one of the stories. It tells us how many miles it is. Like, you're just in the middle of this sea, this lake, and the storm is happening and all this stuff, and everybody's terrified, and the waves are like breaking things up, and it's like they don't know if they're going to survive. And Jesus shows up, and the second he gets in the boat, they're suddenly at the shore on dry land. I got to tell you, that sounds like the TARDIS. Like, that sounds like teleportation. That's defying the laws of physics. Okay? That's a weird miracle. And if you think about what that miracle is, okay, let's just take it at its word that that's what happened. This is a miracle that was not done to the people, that was not done to the disciples. This is a miracle that was done to the boat. Like teleporting the boat from A to B. Jesus teleporting a boat, like Star Trek, like beaming the boat from A to B. I gotta tell you, I don't have a lot of explanation for that. I don't have a lot. It's just weird. It's a weird miracle, right? Like, it's not something that, like, if you were to list all the miracles of Jesus, I don't know how many of us would even be like, oh yeah, and then one day he teleported a boat. But apparently he did. Apparently he did. So that's what we read. We have walking on water, and we have boat teleportation. We have 2 miracles. But actually, if you read, we're not going to read it because we're gonna, okay? Like, come back next week. We'll read the other ones. When we get to the other ones, there's actually the other gospel writers explain that this horrible storm, like we named the sermon series the storm, this horrible storm is the center of everything. This horrible storm happens. And as soon as Jesus gets to them, the storm quits. Like Jesus, like we have a miracle where Jesus calms the storm, but apparently that happens more than once. Jesus just makes the storm quit. Like the waves, the wind, the lightning, the rain, it's all done. He just makes it stop. What we have in this story then are 3 miracles. We have Jesus walking on water, we have teleporting a boat, and we have calming a storm. And I got to tell you, what's interesting about that is not a single one of those has anything to do with the disciples. None of them. Apparently Jesus could walk on water just for fun. I don't know why he did it that way. Like, the dude clearly has an ability to teleport. I don't know why he's walking on water. I don't know why he's walking anywhere, if I'm being honest. If I had the ability to teleport, I would never walk again. Like, ever. I would just... Walking's for suckers at that point, but I digress. Jesus is walking on water. That's a miracle that he's just doing it because he can. Like, it's just, like, yeah, we're going to talk about how that might teach and inform the disciples, but at the end of the day, like, we can admit, it's very different than casting out a demon. It's very different than healing somebody who's sick. It's very different than raising the dead. Like, a dead person is dead and then they're not dead anymore. Like, this is not a directly for people miracle. It's just something Jesus is doing. Walking on water. The boat. Jesus teleports a boat. That's an object. A big object, but an object. And yeah, fine, the disciples are in it, but this is not, like, he could have individually, done something with the disciples so that they're on land, or like, he did it to the boat. It's for the disciples, but it's not about the disciples. It's just Jesus doing this miracle. Then again, the same with the storm. Same thing. He stops the storm. These miracles are Miracles that of which the object is not a person. And that's really important to see. Because look, I get it. Like I get why we get too big for our britches. I do. Like we just had Easter, right? And what was my lesson last week at Easter? Jesus wins, so do we. Like it's hard to hear that and not think, oh man, it's about us then. Equally, it's so hard to hear things like, well, I have a personal relationship with Jesus. Which has to be my least favorite phrase that's technically true. Because again, it's this. It makes you think like, well, I like Jesus and me have something that like is different than everybody else. And again, it's technically accurate, but it's maybe not the best thing to think about. Because when I have a personal relationship with Jesus, it's very easy for me to build Jesus into a personal entity just for me. And funny story, it's real easy if I have a personal relationship with Jesus that to think about Jesus being so personal that like the things I like are the things Jesus likes. And the things I don't like are the things Jesus doesn't like. And the things that I hate, Jesus super hates those. And the things I love, well, Jesus really loves those. And yeah, Jesus has said what's right for everybody, but I have a personal relationship with him. Why can't I break those rules? Why can't I be the special exception? I have a personal relationship with the guy. I remember when we went to Disney this last time, I don't know, a couple years ago, Stephanie's brother is a tour guide. We have a personal relationship with a tour guide. Guess how many rules we followed? Like, we're just walking to the front of lines. Jonathan's just like, hey, I know that guy. High five. We're on the ride. Everybody else is waiting for 3 hours. Like, doing all this stuff, and it's like, let's go in the back here. Like, open up a door in a wall. Let's walk around. Like, I've got a personal relationship with him. I don't have to follow the rules. And it's so easy for us as Christians to think in terms like that. And so it's really, really vital that we have a dose of humility where we understand, man, our Lord and Savior is the guy who walked on water, which had nothing to do with us, who teleported a boat because the boat is actually the object of that miracle. And also, here is the storm that he's calming because he apparently has mastery over nature. Yeah, I have a relationship with that being, but that being has a relationship with everybody. And at the same time that we hold that information, we do need to understand that we are loved. Because yes, these miracles, the object of all of them were something else, but Jesus walks on water because he's going towards his disciples. Jesus teleports the boat to get them out of the storm. Jesus calms the storm to make it go away. It's not about the disciples. It's about Jesus, but he does love them. I just want to make sure it's straight in our heads. So there's one passage of Scripture that is so helpful for us to understand what's going on here. This is what we read. One of my favorite books of the Bible, if not my favorite book. One of my favorite passages in the Bible, if not my favorite passage. This is what we read in Colossians chapter 1. Paul says this: Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. He existed before anything was created. He is supreme over all creation. For through him, God created everything in the heavenly realms and on earth. He made the things we can see and the things we can't see, such as thrones and kingdoms and rulers and authorities in the unseen world. Everything was created through him and for him. He existed before anything else, and he holds all creation together. Christ is also the head of the church, which is his body. He is the beginning, supreme over all who rise from the dead. So he is first in everything, for God in all his fullness was pleased to live in Christ. And through him, God reconciled everything to himself. He made peace with everything in heaven and on earth by means of Christ's blood on the cross. You see both sides there, right? It's not about us. Jesus made everything, including things we can't see, which means things we can't see are real. It's a fun thought anyway. The things we can't see are real, and they have nothing to do with us. If God made people and God made things that we can't see, what that means is that God made us, and also God said, there's things I don't want you to have anything to do with at all. Because as it turns out, this has nothing ultimately about us. It is everything is made by Jesus for Jesus. This story, Christianity, is his story. It's not ours. It's his. And that's so important for us to see. That Christ is bigger than us. I love one of the verses that says, where is it at? It says, Christ is also the head of the church. Like, if Stephanie sends me to the store for like 5 or 6 things, she's like, oh, also get me Oreos. That's the phrasing here, right? Like, the important stuff is over here, but also the Oreos. That's how Paul talks about the church. He made all the things that exist. He made everything you can see, everything you can't see. Also, of course, he's the head of the church, but and yet, while this should cause us to be humble enough to say it's not about us, it also shows us the love that he has, because he made peace with everything in heaven and earth. That includes us. We're part of everything by his blood on the cross. He reconciled everything to himself. Christ's death on the cross was to tell the whole story, was to complete the whole thing, was to bring everyone home, and y'all are part of everyone. We should look at the cross and say, oh my gosh, how much does Jesus love me? That's appropriate. What's more appropriate is looking at the cross and saying, oh my gosh, how much does Jesus love everybody? What's even more appropriate than that is looking at the cross and saying, oh my gosh, how much does Jesus love everybody and everything? You see, we just tell too small of a story when we put ourselves at the center of it. And we don't tell a big enough story at all when we don't understand how loved we are. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about Balaam and the donkey and Balak and all of that, or whether they're talking about Jesus walking on water and the storm and the teleporting of the boat and all of that. At the end of the day, it brings us to a place where we say, okay, the world is not about me. The world is about Christ. It's not about what I want and who I think things should be, and it's about what Christ wants. But I can trust him because he loves me so much that he included me here too. It wasn't everybody but Drew. It rightly maybe could have been, but it wasn't. This morning, we're in our first week of our series called The Storm. The next month, through all of April, we're going to talk about this one story and what we learned from it. There's a lot going on. We could probably do more than, we could probably do 2 months. We're going to limit it to 1, but we're going to talk about this story. We're going to talk about this one night that kind of changes so many things to the disciples. But as we begin, we have to kind of get grounded on who we are. This story is not about you. It's not about me. Our faith is not about you, and it's not about me. Our faith is about Christ, but we are blessed. We are fortunate. We are lucky enough that the God who made us said, I love all of you so much that I'm bringing you all home. I'm bringing everything in. And I love this world so much that I'll do miracles on donkeys and storms and boats too. Because that's who God is, and that's who we are as a result. Our first lesson from the storm goes like this. The world does not revolve around you, but you are unconditionally loved by the one that it does. The world does not revolve around you, but you are unconditionally loved by the one that it does. We're going to sing a song. Look, y'all know the invitation. If y'all haven't been baptized and you want to, you should do that. That's cool. You know it's not a perfect church because I say it every week, and you guys hear me, so that's cool. Invitation is cool. Just like, hey, just let me know what you want to do. High five. Next. I'm going to kill some time while they walk up here. Stephanie just stood up. No, you're good. You're good. So let me reiterate everything by repeating the point in my own words. Do you guys notice I do that in every sermon? Just giving away the game here. Like, I'm just trying to kill time, so I'm like, let's reword that. You are not. We want to be a church that understands that we are not the center of attention, but we are always loved. And everyone is always loved, and no one is the center of attention besides Christ. As we stand,